This is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. Here with me is my co-host, Michael Riedel of the New York Daily News.
The Roundabout Theater Company has revived a terrific 1962 musical, Little Me. It's really a very funny show, and it has one of the great Broadway scores by one of the great Broadway composers. He is, of course, Cy Coleman. You all know his musicals, Sweet Charity, The Life, Barnum, City of Angels. I could go on, but let's get right to the man himself. Cy Coleman, welcome to Theater Talk.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That's quite an introduction.
I'm very good at those
I
introductions.
know, terrific. I like it.
Inspired, though, by the
It was
talent.
inspired for me, yes.
Cy, I'm always curious to know how a musical comes to be written. Can you sort of take us back to 1962 and tell us the circumstances under which you came to write Little Me?
I think Little Me was, there was a book out that was not even really a book. It was sort of like a photographic album.
Well, it was excuse me for interjecting, it was a
Right.
fake biography. It wasn't indeed, it was a fake biography
Exactly.
of a movie star and quite a
They
big
were
bestseller.
very funny photographs.
Yes.
They were extremely funny. And Cy Fure and Ernie Martin, who were the hot producers at that particular time, went to Neil Simon, and they had this idea, you know, of having Sid Caesar, who just came off of Show of Shows, do a variety of characters in the life of this woman. And then, you know, we had auditioned, Carolyn Leigh and I had auditioned for Fure and Martin, too.
She was the lyricist.
She was the
I'm sure,
lyricist, and we had some hits at that time, like Witchcraft, The Best Is Yet to Come. And they came to us, and they had been coming to us with various shows. Matter of fact, the first thing they came to us with Skyscraper, we never did that. We did Wildcat, and then they brought us Little Me. Mm-hmm. Actually, we were going to do another show called The King from Ashtabula with Gore Vidal, but that died, as so many shows do. You know, it died before it got there.
right.
And that's exactly how it happened. So now Neil contrived this book. What he did was make a very funny book and a tour de force for Sid Caesar, where he played 7 or 8 roles. And it was a laugh minute. And then Bob Fosse came in. He was both co-director and choreographer. And Little Me was quite an experience.
Really, why?
Well, you know, first of all, Carolyn Leigh and I were like Gilbert and Sullivan at the time. You know, we were getting to a point where we were slipping the manuscripts under the door.
You weren't talking?
We weren't talking. So there were a lot of battling going on. Sid was going through a very tough period, both emotionally and mentally and so forth. And Fosse wasn't getting along with him too well.
Now, Sid has confessed that he had a big addiction problem. Was this?
Yes, he definitely did. Yes. As a matter of fact, you know, and he's a wonderful talent. He's a really sensational talent. But you know, I remember that strangely enough, for a guy that is so funny, he had really he wasn't too articulate, you know, with people. So it would, you know, and if he liked you, it was physical. So I remember because he liked me.
A lot of hugging.
A lot of hugging, a lot of neck, you know, a lot of neck things, pounding on the back. And as a matter of fact, I'd be walking into rehearsal, I said, sit around.
Duck the punch, right? So you had all this
We had all of these
craziness
things
going on.
exactly. And it was, you know, just created out of that little picture book. And it just got funnier and funnier. And it's, you know, and things progress as they go on. I could tell you stories about when we were in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, the show was just zooming along, just zooming, laugh after laugh. People had said they had to come back because they were laughing on top of laughs. And now we came to the end of the first act, and we had a song in there called Don't You Fret, Lafayette, We Are Here. With everything going on, I mean, here is Belle Poitrine going to entertain the troops in her own inimitable fashion.
Yes, she's the heroine, Belle Poitrine.
Belle Poitrine, exactly. And we had everything. Sid Caesar up on a hill. We had people just dancing all around. And somehow, the show was going great. And at that moment, at the end of the first act, after Don't You Fret, Lafayette, it died. All of a sudden, we went from whoops and everything else to this.
The famous.
And we couldn't figure it out. You know, why? Everybody's loving this show. And we were really in a dilemma. And there was a lot of famous stories with Little Me. We had this meeting, and I'll tell you, this became one of the famous theater stories. We had a meeting with Neil Simon and Bob Fosse, myself, and Carolyn Leigh about the end of the show. And we noticed there was a couple. This was at the Erlanger Theater in Philadelphia. Now, I don't know, The Erlanger Theater was in a section of Philadelphia that was totally deserted. This is very important. You know, it was just dark. You know, you had to really go through some bad neighborhoods to get there. Now, we had our meeting, and we noticed there's a couple. Now, we're fighting with each other, you know. There's a couple sitting there, and I'm thinking, Carolyn, oh my God, we're having an important meeting. She's inviting her friends to stay. In the meantime, Cy is thinking, Fosse, will he ever not do this? And Neil Simon, we're all going, now we're all sitting there. And by the way, they're interjecting into our meeting. Yes, we agree with you about that. And so, now, at the end of the meeting, we walk out in this deserted street, and we're standing underneath the marquee, and they walked up to us and said, we want to thank you for the most entertaining and enlightening evening we've had in the theater. And they walked off into the night.
They're just strange people?
And they said, weren't they with you? Weren't they with you? So they had just sat there.
At the meeting? Oh.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you one more story about Little Me. I just won't bog you down with stories about it.
I want you to clear up one anecdote.
This is the one that's going to happen, yeah. We had, I described, you know, where we were, because it was about 3 blocks from City Hall.
Right.
Bob Fosse had cut a lyric of Carolyn's. I didn't tell her, you can't do that. I mean, you're not supposed to do that. We have got a union. You don't cut lyrics, or even notes for that matter. So now, she walked in and he cut it, and she heard right at the top, she heard this cut, she missed this lyric, and she ran out of the theater, she was a big woman, and she ran 3 long blocks down to City Hall, and somehow managed to talk a traffic cop into coming back with her. I don't know how she got him to do that, but she was very persuasive. She got him back, and when she got into the theater, and she looked around, and there was Neil Simon. She said, arrest him. And then Fosse said, arrest him. Then there was Fuhrer and Martin, she said, arrest them. And then she looked at me, she said, she still had some use for me, so she said, okay, not him.
I had heard it, save him for me.
I guess it works out the same way. But I'll tell you about what happened with the end of the first act. We finally did, you know, we had a song that we wrote by Fosse had cut down. He claimed, he said, well, I brought it back. It was Real Live Girl.
Marvelous.
And it ended up with, it was one chorus for Sid Caesar. And he said, listen, instead of pounding them, you know, because, you know, this show really moves, let me try something soft. And he did this ballet, the World War I soldiers doing this ballet. It was soft and sweet. And you know, this is one of those moments in the theater when you're standing at the back of the theater, you know, you're just puzzled as to what's happening, why they're not really, and we're waiting for this number, and the place erupted. And the number hit. I mean, that's one of those good stories.
Right.
And I try to figure it out, you know, in retrospect, what had happened. And what I felt is this: the show had been going along at such a clip that they'd gotten used to laughing, and they never had a chance to catch their breath. At the end of the first act, by putting in Real Live Girl, by putting in this beautiful ballet, it slowed down, it gave them a chance to absorb everything that they had seen before, and they decided they liked it.
I'm a huge fan of Little Me, but it's generally not been considered sort of, you know, the A-list of the great old musicals that have been revived quite a bit. The Guys and Dolls, My Fair Lady, you know, some of yours, City of Angels. Why do you think that is? Why has it not really catapulted into the front ranks of the great musical comedies?
Well, I'll tell you this. I think it is. I think it is. I think it's a very unique and special thing, and I think this particular version, and I'll tell you about that too, that's been doing, I think, it will really show that.
The new Martin Short version, yeah.
The new Martin Short and Faith Prince, you know, it was Martin Short doing the Sid Caesar. But I think, you know, certain things do happen. This is not cop-out talk, you know, but this is, you see, when we first came in with Little Me, Sid Caesar was now not at his top. He was doing a TV show. And the TV show, which was after Show of Shows, and it was getting slammed.
I remember that.
It was getting slammed every week. Now there was a newspaper strike when we opened. Now, all of these things combined, and aside from that, what happened is this: is that very often producers get some kind of strange ideas in their heads. Ernie Martin had this. Ernie Martin was a very intellectual guy, very very precise, very cold, very kind of there. And none of the emotionalism, let's say, of a David Merrick, you know what I mean, the passion. There might have been passion, but he really worked things out. And he just had a show called How to Succeed.
Big hit.
They had Guys and Dolls, they had How to Succeed, they were writing it. And he had a theory now. His theory was, because he didn't have to do with How to Succeed, you don't need ads. And this was true. The show will either make it or it won't. Now, some shows need ads.
Right.
So we had no ads.
That may have been a reason why.
Now we have ads and no show.
Right, that's a good point, right.
Now, I think legendary shows are shows that really run long. Now, we had a lot of things working against it. Some shows that are not so great, and I'm not going to name names, will run a long time, you know, and become their own legend.
Now and forever.
Some of them are still here.
But they do, you know, and they become legendary. And so when circumstances combine, they go against you like that. But it stayed around. Somehow, the tribute to the show was that it stuck in there. There was a hardcore of people.
And it had standards. The score has standards. I got
Standard
your number.
songs. I've Got Your Number, Real Life Girl. On the other side of the tracks became
That's
everybody's
wonderful.
audition song.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now we decided there was a revival.
Jimmy Coco revival. Right?
Well, it was not Jimmy Coco. It was Jimmy Coco and Victor Garber.
Oh, and these.
Now somehow we were to blame anybody but the authors is a mistake, because what it is that we were totally misguided in that we thought, well, let's split it up. You know, let's not give it to one guy.
Right.
But it was written as a tour de force.
As a vehicle.
Oh, a special guy,
vehicle for.
Yeah.
So we should have either given it to Victor or given it to Jimmy Coco and let them do the whole thing, because it was constructed that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we didn't do that. We made a lot of mistakes over there. So I mean, so that didn't further it, but the legend remained. Everybody talked about it. And I think that's our power. The people that came to see it, finally, there were those that felt so strongly about it that people would talk about it. We got to do Little Me. We got to do. There were always, you'd bump into somebody who would say, "I've got to play that part."
Broadway producers who have talked about reviving.
Ah, yes, absolutely. You know, it would always come up. Now, in this version, what happened is there was something that happened that's quite different in this particular version with Rob Marshall. By the way, you know, Rob is not here. You know,
he was going to be here, but you're filling in.
He was going to be here, but I'm filling in for Rob. But it gives me a chance.
Rob Marshall, the director and choreographer.
Rob, I'm choreographer, and I must tell you, I'm just going to give. This guy is just terrific. You're talking about comers on the scene, people who are there. Rob.
Does he show up for rehearsals, I hope?
He not only shows up for yes. Fortunately, he does, and it's a good thing he does, because he's wonderful.
Yes.
I can say that because he's not here. I would have said it if he's here. Now, they came up with an idea, and I think it was Faith Prince who did that. You know, who said she wanted to play the role. She wanted to play both roles. You see, what happened is against it, we had the role of Belle Poitrine was played by two actresses.
Old Belle Poitrine and young Belle Poitrine.
And young. Right. And she said she wanted to really kind of like do both parts. And we could figure it out how. I said, but I've got a duet. You know, in the last part of the second act, I said, where older and younger sing. And Rob had this idea of, let's give her a terrific, you know, to a new number. Now, there was very funny scenes. We had, when we first did it, it starts off, she's telling her story in the Southampton mansion. Then the second version, she was a drunk in a bar. Some very, very funny lines. Now, Rob wanted to go back to the Southampton mansion, which was okay, because Neil Simon has been working very hard.
Yeah, I hear he's rewriting the book.
She sits there every night, says, "Oh, that joke doesn't work. Here, let me get another joke." And so he's right there. And I show up about 3 times a week and say, and I go beat up on the sound man. You know?
Right. So you're not rewriting the score at all. You're not playing.
But I did rewrite that number, you know, and it's become, now Faith Prince comes out, and she's got a great opening number with 4 boys.
Yeah.
And he had this feeling of Kate Thompson. He wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And so he's got this. But what has happened in this version is, which I love, is that the tour de force of the Sid Caesar role is balanced. Now, all of a sudden, by a tour de force on the other side. So now what you have, instead of a one-man show with a lot of wonderful dancing and some songs, as you say, that have become popular, you have a match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they can play against them. And it was Martin Short, too. I must say that to his credit. Martin said, you know, make that part stronger. I want somebody to play against. I want somebody strong to play against. And he got somebody strong. You're not going to get much stronger than Faith Prince.
Yeah,
you know, she's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. So I just want to talk about how you write a song. I mean, you've written some of the great standards. Do you hear melodies just constantly flowing through your head? You know, do you just hear, "Hey, look me over," and you go up to the piano and out it comes? Or is it a struggle? Is it work? Is it tough? Is it opening a vein when you sit down to come up with a great tune?
You talked about one that was opening up a vein, and it was, you know, and the reason was it was my first real big Broadway show with Carolyn. We had the biggest star on television, Lucille Ball.
Yes, right.
Now, Lucille Ball wasn't Joan Sutherland. You know, she wasn't exactly. You don't write a lot of wonderful musical trills for her. She had a personality voice, and I was trying to think. We sat down, we wrote the score, and wrote everything but the opening number, and we're trying to figure out, how are we going to make her land?
Right.
Well, what can we do? It's the first time people are going to see her on stage, and it was daunting. And everything I wrote, I don't know, it sounded, somehow I got into an Ethel Merman bag, and everything sounded like Ethel Merman to me that I was writing for her, and she wasn't Ethel Merman. And we went on for 6 weeks. And by the way, you got to, no, I'm just going to put a little aside to this story. We had just had some hits, you know, in the pop field, you know, which was Witchcraft and different songs like that, and Patti Page and Tony Bennett, and we felt ourselves as sophisticated writers, you know, with harmonies, you know, with complex harmonies and complex rhymes. Now, after 6 weeks, I was up at Carolyn's house, and she said to me, "Cy," she said, "what if it wasn't Lucille Ball? What if it was somebody who just is, after 6 weeks of searching, you know, just, and what would you write?" And I said, just as if it came from nowhere, I wrote the tune right there, to "Hey, Look Me Over." But we laughed and we said, no, we're sophisticated writers. We're not going to be represented by something as simple as that. And so we decided against it. And I went home, and she called me up. Carolyn was a great one on the phone. Every time she wrote "and if a but," she was on the phone. So she said, you know, she said, remember that funny little tune you played? She said, well, you know, and she wrote, she said, I wrote this. She wrote, "Hey, look me over, lend me an ear, fresh out of Clover, mortgaged up to here." Mm-hmm. And we laughed. They said, that's great. I said, but we're not going to do it. And we went to the publisher, who was E.H. Marsh at the time, a guy called Sidney Kornheiser, and he was the general manager. And Sidney, and we played him all the stuff that we had. It was a Tall Hope, What Takes My Fancy. We played him some of the songs from there and some complex things. And, and then we said, then Carolyn said, you want to hear something funny that'll give you a laugh? We played "Hey, Look Me Over." And he said, that's the one. And I said, this is like one of those old movies, you know, that's the song.
Right, kids?
And we said, exactly. And so we finished the song. And what happened is that we came to the most momentous, the momentous meeting with Lucille Ball. She came up to the publisher's office. And I remember we were very nervous. We were going to play the score for her. What surprised me was that she was more nervous than we were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we went through the score, and she's going, and we hit "Hey, Look Me Over." She said, I can sing that. So she said, I'll even get up and sing it. And now, this was one of those little spinette pianos in the publisher's office that up against the wall, and so she stood on the side. And I started teaching it to her, and we got into one of those, you know, when that fright lock of eyes, you know, when all of a sudden everybody's locked, and sort of, and it was just that almost paralyzed thing. We went, and I thought, oh my God, she's so nervous, and I'm nervous, and she's nervous, and we're just stumbling through this thing. And at the end of it, she looked at me, she said, let's not do that again. My eyeballs hurt. So, if you analyze why that came about, it came about because I had to write for somebody who had a limited range. Mm-hmm. And I had to write something simple. And so I wrote a simple march that became very, very popular.
Right, right.
And it was the circumstance in the theater of writing for that that made it happen. Real Live Girl is a very simple waltz that I wrote because Sid Caesar was not a singer either.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. He didn't have a
So how to make something that was musical work for him, but conform to what he was able to do.
So within the constraints, then you come up with...
You create out of the constraints.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of scores we're hearing on Broadway now. I mean, there's clearly more of an influence of rock music. We have musicals like Footloose based on movies with pop songs. Can you make a case, though, that these scores just are not as strong as the great Broadway scores, because writing a Broadway musical is not the same thing as writing the score for a movie or a 2-minute and 30-second pop song you're listening to on the radio?
Well, I think to write a score, I mean, you really have to get, you have to get into what your dramatic line is, and you have to nurture it, and you have to either get a character, something that has some character to it. We have a new kind of a thinking that's going on, I believe, in some areas. And I believe that area has to do with almost like watching too many commercials between you go from this to this to this. And somehow you make an association. The commercial, I'm just making you watch a commercial that has nothing to do with the product, and somehow you associate. And I think we're getting a lot of songs sometimes in this particular show, especially in movies, which don't necessarily say anything about it, but they create a mood of sorts. And you make the connection yourself. It's not my particular prescribed way of writing or the way I prefer. It seems to work in some cases. It doesn't really work for me. I like to have where we have a song that will either further take your character further, or take the action further, or else build up. And I think surprises are always good. And you can't build up surprises without some kind of dramatic,
that's right,
something happening there.
It's like the old musicals, like say prior to Showboat in Oklahoma, where they had many different composers and sort of almost like skits with songs.
In a sense, you're right.
Yeah.
Because they used to say, well, we got a song about a greenhouse. We'll put a greenhouse in there.
You want Eddie
It's a good song.
Right. Do you,
in a sense, we're back to that.
Yes,
You're absolutely right.
do you fear for the musical theater because of this?
Well, I think we go through cycles, and I think that things will settle out. I think that, unfortunately, some things don't go away.
They run forever.
They settle into their cycles. You know what I mean? But they have a different place.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're going to be able to take away the dramatic appeal and the emotional flavor, and not emotional flavor, but the emotional, what's the word I'm looking for, push and pull of a musical when it's well done.
Right.
When it's done, or how you're so involved in it. I think that, to me, when you're writing a score, it's the underbelly. It is it's the underlying motivation of the show.
But are enough
it sets a style for you. It tells you where you're going, and it also creates a mood that you can't do with a play.
And then you get into the rhythm of that show, and are you not writing? Everyone's on the same level. The lyricist, the composer, everyone's writing the same stuff with the same goal in mind.
Oh yes, that's it. But that's the wonderful thing about writing musicals: the collaboration. The collaboration, when it's working, is something that just feeds. We feed each other.
Yeah.
And something wonderful can come out of it.
Do you see enough young people coming up who are learning how to do that, who are having the training to do that?
I'm distressed sometimes more by some other kinds of things that happen. For example, there's a whole school of thinking that has come out, like in television, where you say, now the way we write television drama is we have 3 stories going at once. And the way we write now musicals is, over here you have a charm song, over here you have a drama song, over here you have, instead of letting it generically come out of the material and live with it and let it express itself, it's a kind of a pop song kind of mentality.
Right.
And for me, that doesn't work. I don't think you'll ever get the satisfaction of a really constructed and strong integrated score book, and everything else that goes. I mean, that goes along with it. That includes the lighting, the set, everything. When it all comes together, you get something that's really magnificent, or can be.
You get a Cy Coleman musical.
Oh, well, thank you, Mike.
Listen, Cy, you've been a great guest. We wish you much success with Little Me, which opens this week. Thanks a lot for being our guest tonight.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It was great being here.
Thank you. We'll see you next time on Theater Talk. And now here's Little Me.
Pardon me, miss, but I've never done this with a real live girl. Straight off the farm with an actual arm full of real live girl. Pardon me if your affectionate squeeze fogs up my glasses and buckles my knees. I'm simply drowned in the sight and the sound and the scent and the feel of a real live girl.
Playbill Online is the official website of Theater Talk and the home of the Playbill Club, providing exciting opportunities for theater lovers. We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.